Hi everyone, this is Dan Snyder from Dan Tony Sports. Tonight I am alone. I do not have any friends here to join me. I'm a sad sack if I do say so. That's because we don't have an actual episode tonight due to me being on vacation. So we're going to do a Minisode. In this episode, we're still going to touch on a couple of things that we're going to do next week, but the main purpose of this is to talk about the picks that we make in our Pick'em Challenge. So last week, Dan, BB, Tony, and I all combined with all tied with a terrible record of 4-6. Yes, the winning people only got 4 of 10 games correct. Dan O'Shea finished with 3. Now, I let Tony and Dan BB pick the games that we're picking from, and I have them right here. We got 5 NFL, 5 college football games. I'm going to run through the games first and then give you everyone's picks of each game, and then we will move on. So, first games are the NFL: Bills versus Titans, Packers versus Cowboys, Rams versus Seahawks, 49ers versus Browns, Bengals versus Cardinals. And for college football, we have Iowa versus Michigan, Tulane versus Army, Air Force versus Navy, Colorado versus Arizona, and Ohio versus Buffalo. So for the first game, Bills versus Titans, Tony picked the Bills, Dan Beebe picked the Bills, Dan O'Shea picked the Titans, and I picked the Bills. I almost went with the Titans, but at the very last minute changed my mind. The second game, Packers versus Cowboys. Tony picked the Packers. Dan Beebe picked the Cowboys. Dan O'Shea originally picked the Packers, realized Devontae Adams isn't playing, and changed his pick to the Cowboys. And I, of course, picked the Cowboys. The third game, the Rams versus Seahawks. Tony picked the Rams. Dan Beebe picked the Rams. Dan O'Shea picked the Rams. And I picked the Seahawks. Mostly because they have a pretty blue and a green. And I think that the Rams really showed that they sucked last week against the Buccaneers. So I'm going to go with the Seahawks. The next game, 49ers versus Browns. Tony picked the Browns. Dan Beebe picked the Niners. Dan O'Shea picked the Browns. And I picked the 49ers. In our final NFL game, the Bengals versus Cardinals. Tony picked the Bengals. Dan Beebe picked the Cardinals. Dan O'Shea picked the Cardinals. And I picked the Cardinals. A lot of people think that the Dolphins are the worst team in the NFL. I think it is the Bengals. I think if you played a match between the Bengals and the Bengals and the Dolphins, that the Dolphins would beat the Bengals. So I'm taking the Cardinals in that game. Switching over to college football. In the case of Iowa versus Michigan, Tony picked Michigan. Dan Beebe picked Iowa. Dan O'Shea picked Iowa. And I picked Michigan. Tulane versus Army. Tony picked Army. Dan Beebe picked Army. Dan O'Shea picked Army. And I picked Tulane. If you hadn't seen it from a couple weeks ago, Tulane had a crazy finish that involved a fake knee to send the game to overtime against Houston, and ended up a couple plays later scoring a touchdown on a crazy long throw. Look it up, ending between Tulane and Houston. You won't be disappointed. The next game we're going to move on to is Air Force versus Navy. My father, an Air Force veteran, would be disappointed to know that I picked Navy, which is true, unfortunately. I picked Navy, but Dan Beebe picked Air Force. Tony picked Air Force. Dan O'Shea picked Air Force. And I'm the one who picked Navy. We then move on to Colorado versus Arizona. For some reason, Tony picked Arizona. I don't understand that. Arizona is a very bad team. Dan Beebe picked Colorado. Dan O'Shea picked Colorado. And I picked Colorado. And our final game, Ohio versus Buffalo. Since they put up that awesome first half against Penn State, Buffalo has just looked absolutely horrible. So, Tony picked Buffalo. Dan Beebe picked Ohio. Dan O'Shea picked Ohio. And I picked Ohio. So just to recap, Tony picked Bills, Packers, Rams, Browns, Bengals, Michigan, Army, Air Force, Arizona, Buffalo. Dan Beebe picked Bills, Cowboys, Rams, 49ers, Cardinals, Iowa, Army, Air Force, Colorado, Ohio. Dan O'Shea picked the Titans, the Cowboys, the Rams, the Browns, the Cardinals, Iowa, Army, Air Force, Colorado, Ohio. And I picked the Bills, the Cowboys, the Seahawks, the 49ers, the Cardinals, Michigan, Tulane, Navy, Colorado, Ohio. So those are our picks. Next week, we will be back live, and we will have quite a show because there's a lot of stuff about to be happening. Next week, we're going to talk NFL. We're going to talk college football. We're going to talk Antonio Brown with his crazy lawsuits. He's trying to recoup all of his money that he, at one point this season, was guaranteed. But because he acted like an idiot, lost a lot of it. All of it, pretty much. Also, the NHL season starts tonight, and NBA season will be starting soon, so we'll touch on all of that. Maybe we'll work in a little bit of baseball. The A's and the Rays play tonight. Go Oakland. I hope you enjoyed this quick little recap and look into what Dan D'Antoni Sports has coming up for you next week. So for Dan Snyder, have a good night.